AVIAREPS is a global leader in international travel and tourism. In 67 own offices in 48 countries, we're working with more than 250 international tourism brands, from destinations to airlines, from hotels and hospitality to car rental and cruise. We've created this weekly live stream for you, our international clients and partners, and we want to look at various international markets and provide you with weekly updates what recovery scenarios will look like around the globe. My name is Drechsler. I'm COO Tourism AVIAREPS. Today, I have with me Ashley Harvey. Ashley is AVIAREPS General Manager in Japan. Ashley has more than 20 years of experience in the fields of travel, PR, and marketing, and has worked for many international tourism brands such as Visit Britain prior to joining AVIAREPS. Japan, with a population of more than 126 million people, is a major market for many international tourism brands and destinations. Ashley, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon from Tokyo. My first question.
Hello to everyone who is watching, and yeah, here we are in Tokyo and Munich.
Super. Ashley, my very first question to you. Asia first in, first out of Corona lockdown. Can we say this?
Yeah, I think so. So, you know, at the turn of the year when this situation began to escalate, we probably all were a little bit surprised to see the actions in Wuhan, but that was clearly the right thing to have done. And China is definitely coming back out of it, and I think it is showing some positive signs. So we've all been struggling in tourism and many industries for the last 3 months. So it is really nice to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Just a couple of examples. Shanghai Disneyland tickets went on sale last week, sold out within 30 minutes. Domestic travel across China is absolutely booming. Airlines were at around about 60 to 65% load factors. So although all of that doesn't really affect Japan and actually doesn't affect many of the people on looking at the moment, I think it is just nice to see some good news after 3 very bleak months.
Absolutely. Ashley, can you please share a little bit in more depth an update about Japan itself?
Sure. So we are under a state of emergency. Actually, Japan has 47 prefectures. 39 of those prefectures are no longer under the state of emergency. Tokyo, Osaka, and a few others, including Hokkaido, still are. But we have an announcement on Thursday from the mayor of Tokyo, expected that she will suggest that the state of emergency for Tokyo is lifted as well. There were just 10 cases over the weekend in Tokyo and none in Osaka. So it kind of feels like we're moving through that. So from a business perspective, yes, many of our clients, their contracts have been paused, but we have picked up a couple of PR contracts, notably for digital and traditional PR for a new opening hotel. And then interestingly, we've also picked up some project work for a Danish furniture shop, which has a couple of retail outlets which are opening up. So there is things happening. Over in the Nordics, our AVIAREPS team picked up a Japan National Tourism Organization contract to promote Japan to Scandinavia. And then also we received some positive news from Brand USA, who are looking to really ramp up what they're doing in Japan from around about July, August. So slowly after this last 3 months, which has been quite traumatic, we're starting to see some things, some signs of life. And we, as you know, Thomas, you know, we've done a global survey of travel trade, and some of the results out of Japan were, relatively speaking, quite optimistic. So last year, Japan posted 20 million outbound trips, which was its record year ever. And then that momentum carried on into January and February. So up until February, 2020 was looking like a great year as well. Things changed, but the survey that we did for the Japanese travel trade recently, they are reasonably optimistic to have something on outbound coming back September, October, November, December of this year. Clearly, they know it's not going to be boom times just yet, but they are reasonably optimistic. And that's sort of coupled with flights reopening up in July. So JAL will fly to Guam from July. Turkish Airlines is coming back. I saw this morning Finnair is launching back to Haneda, Nagoya, and Osaka from July. Cathay is ramping up its flights. So it's starting to see those green shoots of recovery. And I think that is important because the clients who are still very active in market, for example, Fiji, Ontario, Brand USA, are going to get an awful lot of love from the Japanese travel trade. So I think, yeah, I mean, the timing for this call is quite good because perhaps a couple of weeks ago, there's no way I could have delivered such a, relatively speaking, optimistic preview of what we think is going to happen, but it's starting to look better. But I don't think, and this is true for every country, and I'm sure everyone listening would agree with this, I don't think recovery will be a linear path. I think we might have to take 2 steps forward for 1 step backwards, but at least we are seeing some kind of forward momentum.
It's very exciting news, Ashley. If we're speaking about marketing in 2020, what does it mean? Does it mean back to the basics, or is it more innovative than ever before? We're hearing different things. Different tourism boards are doing different things. We are in a situation where we need to support our clients more than ever before. So is it back to the basics, or is it innovation?
Well, I think basics and innovation can sit hand in hand. So we're advising all of our clients to go back to the basics, the 4 Ps: price, product, promotion, and place. And then internally, when we're looking at recovery plans, we've got a little catchphrase that we're using, which is fast and frugal. So in terms of the basics, you can be quite innovative with the price. I have started to see destinations offering vouchers, refunds, special tabs when you come to restaurants to travelers. So people are starting to think about how can I entice that first wave of traveler back? Maybe that first wave of traveler is indeed a lost leader. But when it comes to promotion, it's better to show that you are open with people rather than just say, hey, we're open. So I think we will start to see some very interesting price strategies. In terms of product, I think, this is good. We're already seeing it in the airlines. They're talking, do we keep the middle seat open, or how do we do this? I think hotels are having a similar conversation, and we may start to see hotels looking at how do they minimize high touch areas, like TV remote controls in the rooms, light switch. Does that all go to Alexa or Siri type of voice activations? So I think this can be some technological innovation there, which and that's already in place. It's really about activating it. In terms of promotion and then how do you promote it, I think if you really want to get good bang for your buck right now in Japan specifically, then I think digital is a very positive way to go. But I also would sort of caveat that with the fact that I feel that the Japanese, when they start to travel again, will be quite reliant on the travel trade. I think they'll be inspired by Line travel or Instagram or Facebook, but I still think they're likely to look for guidance and reassurance from the Japanese travel trade. So in that sense, I think promotion needs to be both digital, which is kind of 2020 in people's minds, and then more traditional with some traditional PR supporting the digital work, and then an underlying basis of travel trade B2B work. So I think you can be innovative with those 4 Ps. And in terms of our catchphrase, fast and frugal, look, stuff has changed so quickly. it wasn't that long ago that you and I were being invited to speak at conferences about over-tourism, which seems like a different world now. So you need to move fast. We as the agency need to move quickly, and I think the DMOs and the hotels and the airlines are also having to move quite quickly. But we all have to realize that there's not a lot of cash kicking around. So hence, internally, we've come up with this idea of fast and frugal. How can we work with our partners who we already have long relationships with for barter? How can we partnership together where there's limited cash? How do we make those things happen? So that's a sort of thing where we are with marketing in 2020. Innovative, back to basics is the summary.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Ashley, you've created an interesting phrase called post-traumatic growth. Can you please explain to us what you mean with this phrase and what it does mean for us and for our clients?
Yeah, so quite commonly people would talk about post-traumatic stress, which is obviously a negative thing. But what we're trying to think about is how could this trauma that we've all been through be turned into something that is more positive? And in fact, how can we grow out of this trauma? So we have started to put together 5 broad themes in terms of how does tourism come back. And I suspect these themes are pretty similar to most people who are having these conversations. Many of the people watching now will probably be nodding, going, yep, I can see what you mean with that. So I think the first step for this post-traumatic growth is what we're calling super domestic. So for example, and we're seeing it in Italy, we'll see it in Tokyo as well, you can travel within a very small area. So for example, Tokyo, people may be allowed to travel anywhere within Tokyo and go to any bar or restaurant or hotel in Tokyo, but there may be some advisory and precautions on going outside of Tokyo. And I think that will be quite common. We're already seeing it in Italy, already seeing it in France. So I think that will be very common. So I think that's quite important for any of the tourism suppliers to think about how do they activate a market which they probably don't deal with too much. I think footfall from the local market is rather taken as a given, and it always happens. But actually, I think there is going to be quite a dash for consumers, or a very competitive dash for consumers. So I think this super domestic stage is quite important because that's going to get money back into people's tills and restaurants and hotels, etc. Then after that will come wider domestic, where we can travel around the country. And I think that will give people the taste of travel again. I think we'll start to see after that short haul coming back, but I think it's looking increasingly likely that it will be bilateral. So I'm sure you guys have already seen that New Zealand and Australia has set up a travel corridor. The plan is that they'll be able to travel freely between that. And I think some of the Pacific states, Fiji, etc., are looking to get involved with that too. And I can imagine, that happening with South Korea and Japan, Taiwan and Japan, and perhaps some of the big cities in China. And also, I do know that at the moment, the Chinese government and the Japanese government are looking at business travel protocols and negotiating how does that work in the new world. So this short haul between bilateral, I think, is the third stage. And fourth stage would be wider short haul, where people are much more prepared to travel and those immigration quarantine restrictions start to come down. And then finally, I think we will start to see long haul coming back. And I think the Japanese will be inclined to travel to places that they perceive to be quite safe. And off the top of my head, places like Australia, the West Coast, Canada have not really been in the news that much for negative reasons on this. So I think it's still perceived quite safe. Certain areas of Europe, I think, will be perceived to be quite safe. And I think Southeast Asia, from Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, they've dealt with this reasonably well. And I think the media coverage of Japan around those areas has been sort of in the vein that basically these places have done a good job and at some point will be safe to travel back there. So those are the sort of 5 stages we see for this post-traumatic growth. But coming back to the point, we would love growth to be linear, a smooth path to recovery. I think it will be staggered, and I think we'll see immigration restrictions come down and then shoot back up again and then come back down again. But overall, the delta will be up. And I think at some point we'll see Japan being back at the 20 million mark, perhaps in predictions are dangerous, aren't they? Maybe 24 to 36 months, we might get back to around about 20 million. Let's see. Now, the yen is quite high at the moment, and traditionally when the yen is high, outbound travel from Japan is very good. I mean, there's reasons why it's not going to be particularly good this year, but if it stays high, that could work to our favor.
Great. Thank you very much for the observations and for the update. Ashley, we wanted to limit the questions and the answers from your end to 4 questions for our very first live stream session. But since we're live, we're also receiving questions. And one question I just received is long-term changes in Japan post-COVID. Do you see any changes, the way Japanese will be living, will be consuming in a post-COVID world?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on LinkedIn and any of the newspapers, there's a discussion around new normal and what is new normal, what are the changing consumer behavior patterns, etc., etc. And then obviously with just sort of a limited time frame, it's quite difficult to say what will take hold and what won't take hold. I think in Japan specifically, perhaps the biggest challenge and upheaval has been in work from home. So just in case anybody doesn't know, Japanese apartments tend to be quite small. They're not really designed for anything other than sleeping and eating. And a big chunk of the workforce, including the AVIAREPS team, have been working from home. And so I think that will eventually have an impact on how people view their work-life balance, because people have had to adapt. And I think it has given companies more confidence in their employees to feel that they don't necessarily need to be in the office from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. to prove that they're working. Work is getting done, and the economy is just about ticking along, as all economies around the world are just about getting on. People have been working from home, give or take, for 2 months, and it's still working. Work is still happening. Good things are still happening. So I imagine there might be greater flexibility, and with that greater flexibility, you would hope people find a better work-life balance. And how that reflects on us in tourism is that hopefully the Japanese will have more free time and more leisure time. And once they have the confidence in overseas travel again, they will use it. I mean, I think every country that I've seen saw a huge surge in digital and social channels usage as the lockdowns came into place. And I think that will continue. And online shopping, which was really well established in every country, including Japan, I think will continue to drive things. I do still see a role for the traditional travel trade here in Japan, and actually probably around the world, because I think people will require like the advice of professional travel agents. Where do I go, and what happens if, you know, this happens? And so I could see some, like a polarization. There'll be the speeding up of work from home and digital, but at the same time, a greater reliance on some of the more traditional forms as well.
Okay. Here's another question from one of our audiences. What kind of recommendation would you give to a client either re-entering the Japanese market or entering the Japanese market for the very first time in regards to timeline, budget, scope of service, Is it now a good time, I guess, is the question, or should that client wait for some time? What kind of recommendation would you be giving?
Yeah, I mean, wait and see, I guess, is one answer, but what are we waiting to see? I think the inspiration to travel needs to be front of mind now. Most people's inspiration comes from digital channels, whether it's the international ones such as Instagram or the more local ones such as Line. So I think if you want to get your destination, your hotel, or whatever it is you want to promote into the minds of the consumer, then you need to be having localized Japanese content onto the social media channels. And that can be done very quickly and set up very quickly. And obviously, as we all know, it's very measurable. I think it is also vital, coming back to the point I made just a minute ago, actually, to have a baseline of travel trade engagement. Roughly about 60% of Japanese travel is FIT, but a big chunk of that FIT is actually through the Japanese travel agents. And I do think they are going to play an important part of travel for the foreseeable future out of Japan. I think inspiration will come from the online channels, and I think purchase stage will come from the more traditional travel trade channels. And then during travel, I think all of the destination marketing organizations that we were dealing with and do deal with have some form of user-generated content, but I think keeping UGC front of mind for all promotion going forward would be great. I think destinations, hotels are going to have to show people enjoying the property or enjoying the destination, rather than just say, please come and enjoy the destination. So to come back to your question, I think now come in straight away, immediately with digital. If you have a small budget to add to that for B2B, that would be a very good idea too. And to be honest, in Japan, the traditional PR mediums are still very strong. There is some beautiful quality luxury magazines that not only is the production beautiful, but the journalistic content is incredible. So I think, those three channels are important, but if you had to prioritize immediacy, time-wise, then digital first. Budget-wise would be digital with travel trade, and if you had a bit more, then certainly I think it would be well worth traditional PR too. I mean, we've been going about business in a virtual world, as I suspect everybody has. We've hosted travel trade webinars to 50, 60 Japanese travel trade on a regular basis. We've done the same for media briefings. So it's interesting that we've been pretty much able to carry on, a few technical hiccups here and there, but pretty much we've been able to carry on. And the only thing we can't literally go and do is go and see the staff in the front line in the offices, in the travel retail outlets. But even those we're looking to do little sales pitches into the retail staff as well. So pretty much we can do everything we can. And the other thing that came out of the recent survey that we did with the travel trade is they are keen to find new products and they are keen to get things going. So if anyone is in market now, it's those destinations that are most likely to come out of this best. If you show Japan love, Japan tends to show love back to you.
I think that's a wonderful closing word from you, Ashley. So let me thank you again very much for your time this afternoon via Tokyo. I want to also thank you very much for our audience for being with us for this very first global tourism live stream from AVIAREPS. We hope you found it insightful. Next week, we look forward to continuing and discussing with you insights, updates on Germany and German-speaking markets, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And again, I want to thank you all for being with us today, and I look forward to our live stream next week from AVIAREPS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.